So with the latest Battle for Azeroth alpha build, they've been putting in more of the Azerite armor pieces now. So with the last build, the only way you could view any pieces is if you created a new character where it would start you off with a breastplate, or whatever you want to call it for your armor type. That's no longer the case. In fact, they've now put the starter zone in the starter quest, the scenario for the Battle for Lordran. I've just done a video on that, so you can check that out. But what it means is the pieces I've been gathering whilst leveling up have now, which were before just pieces with primary stats on and stamina, no secondary stats, have now got Azerite traits on them. So if I just check this one out now, we can shift click here. It doesn't show you them on the tooltip. That's important for what I'm going to talk about next. So you can see here a couple of things. First of all, just like Blizzard were talking about, the top row is just things that affect your abilities. You've got a generic thing there, which in this case, Blightborn Infusion, spells and abilities have a chance to draw Wandering Soul from Thros. The soul grants some of its power, increasing your crit for 40 seconds. In other words, using your spells and abilities gives you a random chance to get some crit. Fairly generic there, could be used for anyone. And then you've got one for each of your abilities tied to a particular spec. Now, Blizzard did say that because some of these abilities are usable by multiple specs, it's only a suggestion that you take it for that one. So as Beastmaster, for example, I should be taking this one that affects Bestial Wrath. And of course, Bestial Wrath is only going to be usable on this spec. So we've got there that Rapid Fire, gives me haste there. And Serpent Sting damage applies latent poison. So you've got one really tied to each spec. Sometimes it's for an ability that's shared across multiple specs. A lot of the times, from what I've been finding, it's not. Then on to the second row. Now, if I see here, I'll see that I won't be able to get the second row if I choose one of these. So let's say I choose that anyway. My Heart of Azeroth, isn't quite high enough level to access these. But speaking of that, now one thing I was complaining about is the fact I have no idea when it's due for an upgrade. We now do have a bar that's been added just above our health bar in the same place as the artifact power is in live. And in fact, it is still called artifact power if you have a look there. But nonetheless, that's a little... that'll be fixed. It does show you how far away you are from your next upgrade. But the way it seems to be is, top row, you've got this generic one, and then you've got one for each ability here. Next row down, you've just got something random. It doesn't appear to be anything that's going to give you any extra power. It's more defensive in nature. It tends to be defensive and movement type abilities. So, for example, in this case, while no enemies are within 20 yards, you heal for blah, blah, blah every 2.6 seconds. This one, when you take damage, you heal for a certain amount, can't occur more than every 6 seconds. Then on to the next row, it's the item level boost one. Now, important point to note out here, they've put this in here, temporary user interface. The reason they've suddenly added that is because in the last build, when they introduced this Azerite piece, I think there was a lot of people complain about a number of things. One of the things people complained about is the fact that this interface is not what was shown at BlizzCon. And I think people preferred the interface that was shown at BlizzCon. I mean, I don't care one way or the other. So what they're doing is indicating that the way this is currently is, which looks very much like Netherlight Crucible territory. Maybe that's why a lot of people don't like this one. Is not what it's going to be like eventually. It's just there as a placeholder until they decide to sort it out. Now, that's the only Azerite piece I have on this one, so I'm going to show you another character in a moment. But just to point something out, so what I was thinking is, okay, so they've added Azerite traits now. So let's have a look at some of the raid ones. So I'm going to, if I look at Uldir, third boss I think has an Azerite piece. No, actually, never mind, doesn't matter. Where is it? Shoulder, there we go. Now, we can see here it's not showing us traits on that. It's only got primary stats on it. It is an Azerite piece. But the other thing is, it does say there at the top, 8.0 raid, Uldir, boss 2, male shoulder 1. So, placeholder type stuff. Okay, fine. But the other thing then to look at, so in dungeons, for example, where there are items that you can actually get. If I just put all the slots here and I say chest, this one actually does drop. This isn't placeholder. It is in there. But again, it doesn't show the secondary stats. Now, there's one of two conclusions you can draw there, because if you look at this, it doesn't show you on here. One is that it doesn't want to show the traits below it because maybe that'll take up too much space. It's a tooltip thing just to stop the window for that piece of gear being huge. Also, bear in mind the top row are very class specific, so they won't change. These ones underneath here, of course, have got nothing to do with classes. You get these same traits on other classes as well, so that's got nothing to do with it being a hunter. You'd find the same ones on, say, for a shaman as well, I guess. So it's one of those things where you have to actually get hold of it to be able to see the traits on it. Now, that, of course, raises the spectre of RNG, like the Netherlight Crucible. I don't think that's intended to be the case, however. I think it's a simple case of, you know, you can find the information on it and you will be able to target certain pieces and know what traits they'll have on it. It's just not showing up on the tooltip. I think that's all it's a case of. It's just not showing up here, but you'd be able to look it up on Wowhead or, you know, something like that to find out what traits it actually has, or your class discords to advise you where you want to be farming for the different pieces. So logging on to the Paladin, my 119 Paladin, which is the highest level one I've got, where I've already been gathering several pieces. So again, just to highlight, this chest piece is something I got from a dungeon. So again, I could show you the individual piece. So it's from here. If I just look up gear, all slots, chest, Ashvane's Warden Cuirass, which is what this one is. So this one has Azerite traits on it, but this one isn't showing them. So again, like I say, I think it's a case of they will be on. You just can't see them through the dungeon journal or anything like that. Now, the other thing to point out here, if I compare some of my things. So, I mean, if I look at this one, I got this one as a quest reward, I believe. And what I see is, you see the same basic traits on multiple pieces, but just in slightly different order. So if I compare my helm with my shoulders, for example, so the helm has the same ret paladin trait as the shoulders, but not the same one as the chest. I think what it is, like I was talking about this after on my PAX video, because Blizzard seems to give this impression. I think the situation here is that there are lots of traits, sure, but traits are not unique to a particular piece of gear. So it's not like if you want this trait that you're going to want to farm a particular chest in a particular dungeon or something like that. I think it's that the combinations are. So if you wanted this trait with this trait, then maybe there's only one piece of gear that has that combination. Although from what I can tell, I doubt it. Because I'm looking at both dungeon pieces here as well as leveling pieces. And yeah, you see the same traits, so there's a limited number of traits, it's just the combinations of them that allow them to be targetable. But then there's the other thing, and again, this is something I'm hoping raids deal with. And of course, this is early alpha, and I want to stress this now. There may be many more traits to come that are just not in the alpha yet. Okay? However, what we look at it is at the moment, the top row, you have a choice. I mean, I've completed all my choices here. You have a generic one here, and then you have one attached to each spec. Blizzard have said that some of these spells are used by multiple specs, but the vast majority of those already said seem to be ones that are unique to that spec. So your choice is basically, do you pick the one that's for your spec, or do you pick the generic one? And then on the next row, they're just, I mean, this is a movement speed one. This is a defensive one. If I look at another piece, you know, they're both really defensive in nature. They're both Healy type ones. None of them are throughput ones that I've seen on these two characters so far. So let's check another one. So over onto the Death Knight that I've done a little bit of stuff on. And again, generic one for each spec. You know, in this case, okay, that one could be used on a couple of different specs, I believe, Death and Decay. Down here, in fact, you can see, look, exactly the same ones. I've got the healing one. I've got the healing one there because it's the same basic piece. So it just shows you the same basic piece for different classes is going to have the same traits on it. Now here on the Demon Hunter, you can see something has definitely changed because this is the same Demon Hunter. I haven't been on it since, that I created specifically for the first Azerite armor video. And there were choices down here. There were as many choices as you had specs. And the way it was working out on my Paladin, for example, there was one tanking one, one healing one, and a DPS. On DPS characters, it was 3 DPS choices. Now they seem to have removed that altogether. I think that's what this missing row is. They've removed them altogether. What it used to be is the top row was things that affected your abilities plus your generic one. Then there was a row here that was based on your spec, but, you know, very in terms of your role. So if you were a pure DPS class, it was 3 DPS ones. If you were a priest, you had 2 healing ones and 1 DPS one. If you were a paladin, you had 1 healing one, 1 tanking one, and 1 DPS one, and so on. You know, for the demon hunter, it is 1 tanking one and 1 DPS one. Now it seems to have gone to, for everyone, it's just showing us 1 generic piece, 1 trait in addition for each spec. And then down here, it's just 2. You just got a choice of 2, which have got nothing to do with your roles or your spec or anything like that. It's entirely down to, you know, it's a mixture of movement and defensive abilities. Ones that give you absorb shields or heals or some movement speed. And then this is your item level 1. And then this row down here is completely blank. Now, I don't know whether that's because they've changed their mind on it and this is now how it's going to be, or whether they've just put in as a quick placeholder, because maybe the backlash that's been having, it's a small backlash, but nonetheless, a lot of people were not impressed with the first Azerite piece that Blizzard put in the build last week, and maybe they thought, we're right, we need to expand this to show people there are more traits, but they didn't have them already, so they've scaled it back to an earlier iteration, and maybe the original form will come back again. I don't know. It's really up in the air. I wish Blizzard would just write a piece on it. Sometimes when the community gets confused about a particular issue, Blizzard do respond by explaining what their intention is, but they don't seem to have done that here. Maybe I'll put a post up and try and ask if they would like to do that. But yeah, so then the other thing, just to show you. So if I pick something here, so if I say, okay, as Havoc Demon Hunter, that I'd be playing mostly, I'll do the Demon's Bite. You know, using Demon's Bite 3 times in a row grants me mastery for 4 seconds. I'll just go with that. Or maybe the generic one. But no, I'll go for that one. Now, the important point to note, I know a lot of people would look at this and go, okay, that's fine. But then what happens, I want to go into a dungeon. I want to tank a dungeon. So I want to go do that as Vengeance, of course. So I want a form where I can change it to the one that's using a Vengeance ability. So when we, you know, change our spec, does it allow us to put a new configuration on it? Well, the answer is, as we noted last time, no, and that's still the case now. It's still locked onto that one. Now, Blizzard did say that they are going to allow respecs of it, but they haven't decided yet how often we should be able to do that. Now, for my money, you should be able to do it whenever you can change your talents, because why not? And otherwise, it forces you to do one of 2 things. Either to farm multiple of exactly the same piece, so that you can change the different talents on it, or the traits, I should say, or it discourages you from changing spec. In Legion, we were already discouraged from changing spec because of the extra work required to keep our artifact up to date. Now, that should be removed because they've done what, quite frankly, they should have done with artifact weapons, I said from the start, in that the power of these things, whether, you know, how far we can go down here, is dependent upon the level of our Heart of Azeroth, which is our one piece. We just load all our Azerite into there, and it's the level of that determines where we can go with the pieces. But the issue is that we're still in a situation where we're discouraged from playing multiple specs because it's going to be more work to do so. And, you know, I just think that's a bit short-sighted. I would have it so that talents, when they're being changed, you can also change the traits on your Azerite armour. And that means that you could do it at the start of dungeons, you could do it, you know, when you're in a rest area, or you could do it when you use a tome. But anyway, that's my little roundup of the new Azerite armour changes. I'm sure there's going to be further iterations as well. And of course, I'll keep everyone up to date when they happen too. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.